The resolution is not
Yeah, I
happening?
don't know what to do. No, it's working. We're live now.
Okay.
Popping bottles.
And the bottle just popped. Okay, as always, if someone could give us a quick confirmation that you can both hear and see us, mostly because it just took us 5 minutes to get it up and running. We had a technical difficulty immediately, so now we're even less sure that this is actually working.
Scoot that mic in a little
Okay.
closer.
See if anybody's actually with us and if anybody can actually see us.
Yes. Cindy Hagen is there and saying, can hear and see.
Hi, Cindy.
Hello, Cindy.
Welcome back. Okay, well, if we got one confirmation, one is good as we need. So,
Absolutely.
welcome, Cindy.
Cindy, party of one. Cindy,
Party
of
of
one.
Cook
wine.
is here too.
Two Cindys? Welcome, both Cindys. All Cindy, all day long. This is the Cindy Chat Hour. Thank you all for being such awesome, loyal patrons and revisiting us once more for Digital Bacchus, the online virtual happy hour, live here in Blacksburg Wine Lab. I'm John Boyer, one of the co-owners of this fine establishment.
Katie Pritchard, another co-owner. This great place.
Absolutely. Jason Hudson, just the booze guy.
I always forget what's your thing.
Booze monkey.
Booze Monkey.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
our snooze booze keg.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we did take a week hiatus. Did we take a week off? We didn't do one last week, right? Because the last one was from Folly Beach.
Yeah.
We just got busy doing too many things, and we're returning from the beach, so our head wasn't back in the game to do a happy hour. But now we're raring and ready to go once more. And we did get behind on getting back to our Wine Lab focus, which is all about the wine and about regions, lesser known regions, for us to focus on every month. So our first happy hour of July is on our new region of focus, our new region, lesser known region of focus, which is southwestern United States. Probably you've already read this in the email, but we'll be featuring wines all month from Arizona, New Mexico, and Tejas, as I hear the locals pronounce it. Or is it Tejas?
Let's go with Tejas.
Tejas.
Sounds more comical.
Tejas.
Tejas.
Yes.
The Lone Star State.
The Lone Star State.
Big country.
The newer Mexico, which replaced the old Mexico, which, and of course, there's a wall separating those Mexicos. And Arizona, home of, I don't know, the Grand Canyon. And some very, very tall trees, I've heard. So, it's a petrified trees, I should say. Isn't petrified forest in Arizona?
I believe so.
Isn't Joshua Tree in Arizona? Joshua Tree National Park?
It's California.
That's California?
Yeah, that's California.
Seems like it should be Arizona. Grand Canyon, Arizona, right?
Mm-hmm.
What the hell's in New Mexico then?
Albuquerque.
I've not been to that national park yet.
The Albuquerque National Park. It's a gorgeous place.
Albuquerque. And I only know Albuquerque because it was the place that Bugs Bunny was often trying to get to when he popped up out of a hole, usually
Right.
at the North Pole or the Sahara Desert.
Right, exactly.
Should have taken that left at Albuquerque. Does anybody but me old enough to remember that?
I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
Okay.
I
And
ended up in San Luis Obispo as well.
and I don't have any sort of official launching pad for a lecture on wines of the southwestern United States, except a few facts that I know just off the top of my head, which is this is a wildly underrated wine region of the planet in general. I've not had too many wines I have not liked from even Texas, much less New Mexico and Arizona yet. We only know Arizona wines because of this celebrity. We'll get to that story in a little bit. I only know New Mexico wines because of our first wine we're drinking here on our regional flight, and that is from the Gruet winery out of New Mexico. And Texas makes a hell ton of stuff, and I'm sure my facts are off by a placement or two because things change fairly rapidly. But last time I did a lecture about Texas, it was the 5th biggest producing wine grape. It's number 5 for states of either production of wine or for wineries, but I think it's production of wine. And given that Texas is one of the most gigantic states in the country, doesn't it go Alaska, Texas, California in terms of size?
I think so.
Yeah, Texas is a gigantic state, and all 3 of these states mentioned are really hustling right now for wine production. And by hustling, I mean growing. These are growing wine states, which might be said for a lot of U.S. states, but I'm talking about growing in an exponential fashion. Like the Texas industry, we'll pick on local. The Virginia industry is actually quite big, but it's not growing that much faster. I would even suggest the Virginia industry is maybe plateaued for number of wineries, for volume of wine. It may still be growing a little, but it's kind of on the plateau. Texas is just getting warmed up. No pun intended, because it's hot there. But given the size of the state and the different microclimates that it has, and the population it has, and that it's really, climatically speaking, conducive for wine growth, it's kind of a miracle they're so late to the game.
It's one of those regions that you just never hear about, though.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about California, Oregon, Washington, even Finger Lakes up in New York. I think those are probably the top 4, with Texas coming in at 5, I'd imagine.
I think you're absolutely
Texas is
right.
5 now.
Yeah. So, but it's just not a region that you ever hear anything about.
Right, and
which is unfortunate because you turned me on to all these, and I'm pretty impressed.
I keep saying Texas. It's kind of like, I don't know, when I talk about Europe, I'm usually saying, well, Germany, because Texas is such a big country. Arizona and New Mexico are nothing to sneeze at. But these are wine regions. This is my gut instinct. This is not anything I've read anywhere. I believe you're going to see Texas continue to go up the ranks of wine volume, number of wineries, and wine quality is going to continue to go up probably for the rest of my life. I unless something catastrophic happens, which never happens, of course, like a pandemic. Unless something catastrophic happens, I can't see how Texas isn't the 2nd or 3rd biggest producer of wine in the country in the next 10 years, actually. 20 tops, but I think 10. There's just a lot going on, and it's happening quickly.
Do they have a specialty of grape that they focus on, or
like everybody else, Cab? I mean, everybody wants to grow Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay, so I would assume we could find examples of those wines. And every U.S. state has Cabernet and Chardonnay. Cabernet, I know, is pretty big in Texas, but the other one is
Rhone Ranger.
Rhone Rangers. Is it Grenache? No, Tempranillo. They do a bunch of Tempranillo, I think, is their 2nd most planted grape. And it is, in some of its regions, it is quite hot and quite dusty and quite arid, and some of the areas are at higher elevation, which means, what does that mean for us wine people? Higher elevation means cooler nights. So you start to put 2 and 2 together here, and you actually have a fairly conducive environment for growing, especially big red grapes that have a really hot, long growing season, and then cool nights.
right?
Cool nights is the magic formula, by the way, for intensifying flavors and aromas. So
And you have to have that for the thinner grapes as well, the Pinot Noirs, which I think Arizona does a lot more Pinot Noirs than California, than Texas does.
I actually have no idea. I only know a little bit about Texas and not much about the other two, quite frankly. Besides this wine, which I meant to launch into earlier. Our first wine of the night. Oh, go ahead, Kate.
Sandra also put in that she's been to a couple Texas wineries. She's been to a couple before. So I wonder what her experience was. She had some good wines from Texas.
Yeah, why isn't Cassandra here?
No, this is Sandra.
Oh, Sandra.
Yeah, Sandra.
Where's
What about-
Cassandra?
I don't know.
Darn it, Cassandra.
Yeah, I forgot. I just went to Texas, last year? And I went to a couple wineries down there. And they had some intense stuff. Some of it was The one place I went to in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I can't even remember where I was. Do you remember where I went, Katie?
2 hours from Houston?
2 hours from Houston.
Some small school.
Yeah. Anyway, they had some winery there that was there supposedly for 100 years. Some of their stuff was schlock, but some of it was pretty intense. And given that it's more of a newer region, they're more prone to experimentation. So I'm pretty sure you could probably find every single wine grape on planet Earth grown in Texas. Maybe New Mexico and Arizona too, but I saw some crazy stuff when I was down there, like Sangioveses that have oak aging and all this other. Some of them, I had several Cabernets that were done in old aged in whiskey barrels, and you're like, okay, sure,
let's do that.
Some of them are kind of interesting, some of them kind of good. But I was going to launch with our first wine.
Yes.
Let's get drinking. For goodness sakes, I'm going to take this long to start drinking. And this is what actually gave me the kernel of an idea to focus on wines of the Southwest was this actual label, and that's Gruet. So we're starting with a Gruet Blanc de Blanc out of New Mexico. I'm going to go out on a limb immediately and say Gruet, which I think maybe they've been around for 50 years. I'd be shocked if I was off by 10 years either way. But they've not been around forever, but they're not new. And I'm going out on a limb saying Gruet is, to me, the most consistent, best sparkling wine producer in the United States of America, and they're in New Mexico. And I think a lot of people would recognize the Gruet label. In fact, I would ask the viewers, do you recognize Gruet? It's kind of a famous name. It's a French family. They have property in Gru Champagne, I believe, in the Champagne region. And then some of them somehow migrated to New Mexico 50 years ago. And so Gruet is not an not known name. And I think that even if you didn't know they were from France, that probably some of you would recognize this. I mean, this is a fairly recognizable label to you all, right? You've seen it in grocery stores and other places. This is a big production house. And I'm not saying they're the most consistent and best sparkling wine producer in the United States just because they're big. I just really like their products. And again, it's not, with champagne and sparkling wines, it's all about consistency. There shouldn't be a lot of variation seasonally or vintage. There are very few vintage true champagnes. They blend across years. You blend across different years to make a consistent product. And Gruet, to me, has just been killing it their entire production here in the United States. The one we're drinking right now is a Blanc de Blanc, which means
The white of whites.
the white of whites. So you can get a Blanc de Blanc in Champagne in France. In fact, you can find things labeled Blanc de Blanc all over France and the world. And that simply means a sparkling wine that's made with 100% Chardonnay grapes. The white of white, a white sparkling wine made from the white-skinned Chardonnay grape. What's the alternative?
Blanc de Noirs.
Blanc de Noir, which is a white of dark. So what grape's in that?
Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir. So I think we're going to have a Gruet Blanc de Noir later in the month, aren't we? Do they make a Blanc de Noir?
They do. We don't have that one. We got their demi-sec and the rosé.
And the
Then
rosé.
the single vineyard one, right?
And then
And a single vineyard.
Yeah.
So we bought several of the Gruet products to try them once. We're going to line up a new one every week. But let's do our assessment now of the House of Gruet out of New Mexico,
There is a Gruet
USA.
of Champagne. That's what they started. The family did.
Yeah,
Champagne,
yeah. No, I knew that. I just didn't know if they were actually in Champagne or if they were just
They were in
somewhere else.
Champagne, Champagne House.
Which is why Gruet out of America, they still use the champagne method of production as well. They don't do a generic sparkling wine production.
Yeah, this is totally method champenois, which is the old school true champagne way to do it. And I gotta tell you, right off the hint, if I was tasting this blind, there is no amount of money I wouldn't bet that this is champagne. I just
What's that?
can't
Ready,
get
yeasty?
any
exactly.
difference. Yeah, I
Exactly.
can't get anything besides true champagne off this wine.
Yeah, very very little fruit on the nose, but it's all yeast. It's all bread.
That's a real good crispness, though.
Yeah.
Crispness. Sometimes I feel like champagnes get too yeasty, too bready for me. This one has like a nice balance of like crisp, acidic, but bread.
Sharp and soft all at the same time.
There you go. Exactly. Anybody else have this? Is anybody else following along with us with this tasting today? I believe that the Hagens are, correct?
We don't have it in a standard champagne flute, so I can't comment on the bubble retention or the bubble streams. But honestly, I don't care. I mean, I like
It's
the
just
visual.
good.
I like the visual component sometimes, and I can do a whole lecture on the visual component of what it means when you see streams of bubbles and how big the bubble is and all that stuff. But this stuff just tastes good. We've got this stuff super cold right now, and
Got like little, it has smaller bubbles to me.
You know, when it fills your mouth, it just immediately explodes with just a lot of bubble,
Yeah.
and it just fizzes just right. Yeah, not too acidic, kind of right down the middle where it needs to be.
oh, I totally agree. The bubbles are just right because I can actually gulp this without choking. I mean, some champagnes,
Exactly.
even true champagnes, sometimes you get it in your mouth and you actually can't swallow it yet because
gotta let
it's
it settle
foaming.
first.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
foaming
yeah.
in your mouth.
Yep.
I learned that the hard way. I was like, I'm gonna drink out of the bottle, and I was
No,
like,
no.
yeah, it
Okay.
just made a huge mess.
Can't ever do that.
No.
I mean, it does make for a good viral video.
Just, that's what happens.
Has anyone in the chat room ever drank sparkling wine straight out of the bottle? How did that turn out for you? Inquiring minds want to know.
Yeah.
Out the
Don't-
nose is how it
Yeah,
how it
yeah.
turned out.
Yep.
That's the only way.
Did not go well for me. I ended up just spitting it out everywhere. So.
Yeah. I think everyone has to do that mistake at least once in their life.
Well, I've done it many times, and I'll do it in the future, not because it's a mistake, but because sometimes I don't have a glass on me, and it's like, hey, you got to get the job done one way or the other.
Now you just know not to be like so, like, yeah, just putting it back. It's like, no, just
Gotta be a little
sip.
gentle.
Yeah,
Gotta be gentle.
Yeah, a little
Yes,
sip.
and I'll teach you all the trick.
All right.
You never make full lip contact on the
Yeah.
bottle. You actually use your mouth as a glass, and you pour in.
I see.
That does make sense.
The little
I
open
see.
mouth, the open pour in won't
That
fizz
release
nearly
of
as
the
much.
lips is where the problem goes.
As soon as you tip it so that all the liquid is going the opposite way in the bottle. I mean, all the air.
Right.
So there's air at the top, and if I cap this and I turn it over so that all the air goes to the bottom, that's when everything churns, and you've increased the pressure coming into your mouth. So as long as you pour with the air exposed, it'll just dribble right into your mouth.
I like it. I like it.
I'm not nearly the alcoholic that it seems that I am. It's actually way worse.
It is. It is good to know these things, though.
Yeah.
Lesson
Then
on it.
Cindy and Greg cooked, so they liked it a lot. Really refreshing. And Doug Nelson had a bad experience with champagne as well before in the past, a long time ago. We've all been there.
Tipping up the bottle. See?
Yeah.
I've once again imparted my wisdom. The alcoholic's wisdom.
That and when I won the Super Bowl that time. you
That
know,
one time?
and they were shaking this champagne around. It does burn when it gets in your eyes too. So
Yeah.
next time I win the Super Bowl, I'm going to wear goggles.
Be prepared.
Yes.
Oh, I don't really know that much about the actual, say, terroir and the micro terroir of all these individual AVAs that these wines come from in the Southwest. AVAs is American Viticultural Area, and it's the American version of the AOC in France, the Appellation Origine de Control, which is a physical, legal, bordered area that has rules and regulations for the types of grapes that are grown in it and processing methods and all that other stuff. France is the one that invented this whole system. It's basically quality control, kind of like a trademark or copyright on wine. So wines of Burgundy have to be within this area, have to follow the rules of Burgundy, otherwise you can't put the word Burgundy on the label. The AVA is the American version of that with much laxer rules. The Americans, we don't ever do anything like the French do.
God forbid.
However, we in America understood that, well, it's good to tell people the origin of where the wine is from and to say, hey, we in the High Plains. I think there's a Texas AVA called High Plains, isn't there? In the High Plains AVA, we grow these types of grapes generally, and it's this type of climate, so you should expect this type of wine. I don't know. That was a long definition for me to tell you. I don't know a lot about the AVAs of southwestern United States. However, I've already hinted to a few things, which is why I love Rouet so much. I don't know what AVA they're from. I think it's probably called Grand Canyon or High Plains, Arizona, or High Plains, New Mexico.
High Plains, Texas.
High Plains, Texas. Can you figure out which one Rouet is from?
I know, well, which AVA I don't know, but New Mexico is one of the highest altitude growing regions in the world, kind of comparable to.
And that's exactly where I was going with my hypothesis. I don't know exactly where in New Mexico Rouet is established at, but I can tell you just from drinking this wine and their other wines, it's cold. So they definitely are up in elevation. You said it's one of the highest elevation.
Mexico just says, just in general, most of the wineries are like just 5,000-6,000 feet.
Yeah, well, 5,000 or 6,000 seems a bit high, but
yeah.
maybe. I mean, we're at 2,000 here. Some of those ones in Salta, Argentina, I think, get up to that. I'm not sure that Arizona's that high. But again, I'm all speculating here. I'm sorry, New Mexico. But I can tell you definitively that any place that's specializing in Champagne is pretty far north in France. The district is. In fact, it's the northernmost wine region of France. And Texas is a little further, New Mexico is a little further south than Champagne latitude-wise. But they make up for that. They get those cool climates back by going up the mountains. So again, I've not really toured New Mexico that much, but them and Arizona, they got the Grand Canyon, they got pine-laden forest and mountains all up in the interior of it, right?
Absolutely.
So again, without knowing, I can tell you this is from a higher elevation for a place that's that far south, and that's why you're getting really good solar inception to be able to grow these classic Champagne grapes. That's Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. But it must be really cool nights to maintain this bright ass acidity, because all of their wines are super tight for acidity.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm a fan.
I as well. Any questions or comments here or online about the Blanc de Blanc Method Champenois, right there on the label, from Rouet out of New Mexico? Well, these guys are just making good stuff.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how, like, I understand you come from a country and, like, we do this really well. Our family does Champagne really well.
Cooler so it stays cold.
And then just be like, well, we found an area that we think will do exactly the same, even though thinking about what it must have looked like, the higher elevation, it's not like Champagne, France at all. So
No.
how did they be like, this is going to be a great area to do bubbly? It's just like, this is what our family does, so we'll just do it here. And it happened to work out, or like, it's just kind of amazing to me that.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by those connections too. And again, if we were real wine snobs and researchers, we would have contacted the Rouet family and read their entire history and have answers for you. But I'm not one of those type of people. But I'm always fascinated by what brought these folks to New Mexico of all places.
Right.
What's the story? Because I would be more than willing to believe it was all random chance, as opposed to that they went to like Tahoe to go skiing or something,
right,
on a rich person's family vacation, and then they decided to go see the Grand Canyon, and then they got lost and ended up in New Mexico. That's a story I would believe, as opposed to, well, they were searching the world for a place to mimic Champagne. Like,
right.
No, that story doesn't make any sense at all.
No, they're just the Southern Donner Party. They just ended up getting lost, and this is where we're going to make Champagne at now.
Well, I guess they would, and the
Donner
grape
Party.
website, they're just saying that they had heard that grapes been grown there since like the 1600s, and the Franciscans, and they were like, oh, grapes got grown here, okay, let's check it out. And then they were like, oh, maybe we should plant some. So we just decided to give it a
Were
go.
the Franciscans up in the hills of New Mexico? I mean, maybe.
That's what
I would
read.
imagine
I don't know.
so. I mean, I think, with the Spanish kind of conquering the southern part of the United States and Mexico, I'd imagine there'd be a fair amount of monks hanging around there.
Oh, there's no doubt. I think Katie already did some research, and I can tell you from previously teaching wine history. Remember when I used to teach wine history for the wine class? I gave that up years ago. But I remember I would do a quick lecture of the diffusion, and a quick lecture for me is 3 weeks. But I would do a quick lecture of the diffusion of wine grapes around from its core in the Caucasus Mountain region throughout Europe and then the rest of the world, mostly due to colonization. So I can tell you with some definitive expertise that the first wine grapes that came into North America, period, came in through Franciscan and other orders in what's now Southern California, what's now Mexico, Baja, Mexico, Southern California, and they diffused upwards into what's now Texas and New Mexico. But that still strike me as odd. And the grapes they planted were called mission grapes because they were establishing missions, doing mission work. And they had to have the wine grapes to make the sacramental wine. So a whole lot of early European wine grape plantings were just called mission grape, and it probably was a catch-all of it. Who knows what varieties it was. They just called everything mission grape.
Whatever would grow.
Whatever they brought, whatever happened, whatever they got cuttings of. And that was the path. It actually came in a lot from, almost all of it from what's now Mexico, and some of it even from the western coast of Mexico into Southern California and other parts of the Southwest. But even having said that, I think about the way monks would establish things or move, and the highlands of New Mexico, I think, would be a push for monks to start churches in. But I don't know.
I think the whole state's just high up, so.
That's
Doug
true.
just looked it up and said the Gruet tasting room is just outside of
Albuquerque.
which is 5,300 feet. So.
5,300 feet. You guys are right.
Yep.
That is on up there. I mean, that's nearing the Salta region of Argentina.
It's higher than Denver.
Higher than the Mile High City.
They said
That's right.
they deal with clones or whatever. They have really thick skin. So that's what they're going to deal with to survive.
Thanks for the knowledge.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing about cool, higher areas, and this is pertinent because we're currently living in a pandemic, the higher you go and the colder you go, the less disease is there. That's true for humans, it's true for plants. So there's this one disease that's actually going to start hitting vines around here. It's called Pierce's disease. No one even knows what the hell it is, really. It just turns the veins of grapevines into black goo. It was actually first identified in Virginia. But it's more of a southern climate thing because of humidity. So it's a real humidity-based disease that wasn't really hitting the Southwest at all because it's a drier, arid climate, but somehow it's gotten in there in the last decade or two. And it's one of the biggest challenges of any of the more humid areas of the Southwest is Pierce's because they're pretty far south. But again, you go up the mountains, and I was also thinking of phylloxera, the grape louse that destroyed all world vineyards. There's some places that still have what's called pre-phylloxera grapevines, which means the original, non-grafted original roots from European vines. And I think that maybe Gruet or some other places in Arizona and New Mexico are saying, yeah, we have pre-phylloxera stuff because they're so remote.
Interesting.
Just popped into my head.
Interesting.
As things tend to do. I passed you this so you could go on to the next one instead of listening to me.
All right.
Rage about disease and...
They're saying the major issue they have in New Mexico is freezes. They get hit really hard in the late spring.
Hell yeah, I would
Yeah,
guess so at 5,300 feet
That's their big
elevation.
issue, and they put a lot of soil along the base of the vine, where literally just the buds are just.
It's called hilling up.
Yeah.
You hill up the vines. You basically bury them.
Yeah, so they do that. Keep them safe.
Interesting. There you go.
So the next wine we're doing is from Texas. It's the McPherson Cellars. They're Chenin Blanc. The AVA is the High Plains in Texas.
Texas High Plains AVA.
That's
What a
it.
great name.
Absolutely.
It's on like the chimney. I don't know, panhandle, whatever it's
Oh,
called.
the chimney. I like that.
I don't know. I'm sure it has a better name. But
I don't know if I think chimney. Let's go with chimney.
I like chimney.
I like chimney. It's great. It definitely lets you know where we're at.
yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit more of a temperate climate than further south in Texas. little less arid, getting into the kind of the Oklahoma band of state, Oklahoma, Arkansas, right in that kind of latitude.
But it's called High Plains, so they're on up there for elevation too, I
Sure.
would assume. Let's go ahead and make the hypothetical call that it's in a plain. It's on a high plain.
In the chimney.
And all I can keep thinking of every time I see Texas High Plains is High Plains Drifter starring Clint Eastwood.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
all. I'm like, High Plains? Really?
Hold on a second.
No, but this is a nice little wine. It's a bit more aromatic, I think, than a lot of Chenin Blancs out there.
I had a sip of this earlier. Maybe this is a different bottle, but the one I smelled earlier was kind of dull.
Yeah.
This must be a new bottle 'cause it's a little more
It's like
more nose going
White
on.
flowers and more floral.
Definitely get a little rubber in there as well.
I saw this description in the Wine Folly thing. They called it a very typical flavor profile for Chenin Blanc is bruised apple. And I'm
Bruised
like,
apple.
I kind of get that. Yeah. White pear, bruised apple, honeycomb. Not just honey, honeycomb. White flour. Yeah, and I'm trying to think of maybe white peach. I get a little bit of Wrigley's Juicy Fruit, just a hint of that.
I almost get like I won't say melon, but like cucumber. Weird. I don't know. Just like a hint of like light.
And there's probably some sort of spice you could put a name to. I can't. Not a baking, maybe a baking spice, but there's a subtle spiciness to it. That's I think what I'm calling Wrigley's Juicy Fruit. To me, that has a spice. I think it's clove in that. I think doesn't Juicy Fruit have a hint of clove or a hint of something else
I
in
believe
it?
so, yeah.
So that's what I get off of a lot of Chenin Blancs that I'm getting off of this one. It's a juicy fruit. Maybe it's a bit of clove. Maybe it's a bit of some other baking spice that's just in there subtly. And now my new favorite description, bruised apple.
Bruised apple.
They say leading notes is yellow pear.
Yellow pear.
See that too. A hint of candied ginger.
Maybe that's what I'm getting
Yeah.
on the back of the what I'm saying, the juicy fruit clove thing.
Cindy agrees with my cucumber.
Cucumber. I can't find
I
that
just
one.
get like a hint. I just get like a.
Now, is it all the Cindy's? Is it a
No,
Cindy
it's Cindy
consensus?
Cook. We have a vote.
Yep.
So the High Plains are range in elevation a bit from like let's see, it's between 2,800 to 4,000 feet. Let's see the High Plains.
That's
Texas.
I
Pretty
mean that's
widespread.
still higher than here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's mountains.
Yeah.
Yep.
We should also be, educating ourselves enough to also understand Texas is a gigantic place. New Mexico and Arizona ain't shabby either. So when we're making generalizations, they don't really apply to an area this big. So we've been talking about dusty, desert, arid, cool nights, high elevations. All three of these states have significant amounts of forest, and the High Plains, I think, is a big grassland. So, and there's lower, wetter parts of all these states too, particularly Texas. I mean, I've not traveled extensively in Texas, but I think there's pretty green, downright humid areas of it when you start heading further south.
Sure. Yeah, down
I don't
along
know.
along the Gulf Coast. I
Yeah.
imagine you'd find a lot of that.
I mean, it's a fairly diverse, dichotomy, not dichotomies too, fairly diverse array of different environments. I think my instinct is that virtually all of their wine country is up in the northern parts of these states, northern or higher elevation. What part of New Mexico is Albuquerque in?
It's in the top third.
That's just my instinct where the stuff is growing. You start going further south, especially when you get towards water in the Gulf, I think that starts to get pretty humid. Humid, hot areas are very problematic for grapes. For some of the disease stuff that we already talked about.
I just want to walk.
Yeah, it's so funny. We remember John Hall opened up. She's afraid the cap had pulled off too quickly. When I tasted it earlier, it tasted like nothing. But now it's got a lot going on. Maybe that was a different bottle.
You know, it's got good body for it, for a white. Everything's really, really light and muted. Nothing really punches you in the head. Nothing really stands out all that much. The finish, it's almost like slate, a little bit of stone minerality on the finish. It dries out fairly rapidly. Not grippy by any stretch, but a little
totally agree.
Little tacky.
Yeah, I'd say this is almost a classic textbook example of what a Chenin Blanc is. If you're not sure what a Chenin Blanc is, you got one in your hand. This is right down the middle of the description for a Chenin Blanc grape. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I think it'd be a good salad wine. Like a good, like a salad. It's like green. I don't know. That's what I was looking towards.
Yeah, especially something with a lot of bright fruit in it, or even heavy tomato, heavy little melon.
Yeah. Let's get those fruits.
Like the melon salad, melon cucumber salad.
Maybe even a prosciutto.
Absolutely.
Oh, talk about cantaloupe wrapped in prosciutto.
This might be a good one for that.
This would be a very good one for that.
Yeah, I think the prosciutto, the salt would really play off of this one really well.
Oh,
and the
a
fat.
little bit of salt. Speaking of salt, I wonder if my new favorite Oregon blend, Big Salt, has Chenin Blanc in it. And I know it had muscat or something in it, right? It had a
No,
floral.
it was Gewürztraminer, Riesling, and then there was a small amount of muscat, right?
Didn't we do that like 2 weeks ago? We did Big Salt, or 3 weeks ago?
3 weeks ago, I think it was.
This, for some reason, this 100% Chenin Blanc kind of reminds me of that Big Salt.
A little bit, but
But
less intense.
muted.
Muted.
Much more muted. That's what I like about wines like this in the summertime. They have just enough floral fruit component to be interesting, but they're still crisp and clean enough. When they're cold, you can just guzzle them.
Absolutely.
For sure.
One of the best qualities of a wine.
And I don't think many Americans have drank many Chenin Blancs. In fact, we'll ask the folks in the chat room right now, is Chenin Blanc a wine you've had a lot of experience with? I mean, 100% Chenin Blanc wine. Do you know that much about Chenin Blancs? Do you find you gravitate towards them? Because I try to think of what's in a standard set at a grocery store. I'm not sure Kroger would even have a Chenin Blanc in it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those grapes that people know about, they're familiar with, but it's not a.
I think they know the name, but I don't think
that's what I mean. A familiarity with the name, but I don't think it's something that a lot of people know a lot about or have a lot of exposure to.
I'm trying to think if we've ever featured them too heavily here. I think
South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah.
I think the most famous, most popular white grape in South Africa is Chenin Blanc.
Yeah.
Where they call it what? They have a name for it in South Africa.
Steen?
Steen.
Steen.
S-T-E-E-N.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was like, I got it.
Well, she took my class 30 years ago. She better remember
I
this
take it
stuff.
again every year because
The Steen grape.
I'm looking forward to taking your class this year. It's going to be fun.
I don't think there's much to offer for you guys.
But yeah, I mean, Chenin Blancs and Sauvignon Blancs, that's South Africa.
Yeah, but they used to call it Steen. They still do, I assume. But since South Africa's been trying to sell more wine internationally, it's harder and harder to see it labeled as Steen anymore, because America has so influenced how the world makes and markets wine that they have to call it by what the Americans recognize. And most wine regions on planet Earth now make wines fitted for the American palate's expectations. So even in France, the birthplace of modern wine, who pride themselves on being snobby and making everything different and holding to their old school traditions, even French wine producers have had to make Chardonnays more to the style that Americans like Chardonnays.
And they're changing how they label as well. There's a lot of places that they're not putting the region,
That's right,
the area, the AVA on
That's
it
right.
as its indicator.
For those of you that have tuned in before to this, you know that if it's a white wine from Burgundy, it's 100% Chardonnay. They never used to put the word Chardonnay on it because that's not what was important. It's important that it's from this place.
Yep.
It's not important what grape is in the bottle. But Americans see it the reverse. And we're like, no, we want to know what grape is in there. We don't care where the hell it's from. So, yeah, you're right. More and more French producers are putting the name of the grape right on the bottle.
Yeah.
5 or 8 years ago to allow for that.
Yeah, you see Pinot Noir. I think Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are the big ones that I see a lot on the labels.
Oh, I think we're seeing it almost everything now. Everything has to be labeled by grape, or otherwise most Americans don't get it.
Right.
That's our main way to identify wine. So if it doesn't have that, then it's a huge detriment on the supermarket shelf.
So Cindy Hagen has said she had a lot of Cheneys from South Africa. She recognizes that.
Yeah,
And we'll go from there.
they're quite
Nice.
good.
Yeah, I think they're a bit brighter as a general rule down there.
Yeah.
The Chenins, I
More
think.
floral, I feel
Yeah.
A little more floral. Chenin is this great grape because it's a bit of a chameleon. It's actually made into a lot of different things, including brandy. It's a component of a lot of brandies. There's some big, literally big grapes they use for brandy production because they get really big grapes and they have a lot of sugar, which they don't care because they're going to distill it.
Right.
But Chenin is often blended in to maintain some of this element all the way through the brandy process. They make a lot of dessert wines out of Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc is one of the few grapes that they make it totally dry like this. They make it semi-sweet. And they make it totally sweet. They make it into brandy. Yeah, you can really find Chenin Blanc produced for white Bordeaux. I'm positive that if you've had any French Chenin Blanc, you most likely would have had it from the Loire Valley.
Yeah.
So Loire Valley has certain sub-regions that only make wines from Chenin Blanc. The ones that pop off the top of my head are Vouvray and I think Anjou. Anjou, A-N-J-O-U. Those are both sub-regions in central western Loire, and all the white wines they make 100% are just 100% Chenin Blanc. That's all they do.
Vouvrays are typically on that much sweeter side than.
Semi-sweet to full sweet.
We had some really great Cremante or Vouvray Cremante. Yes, sparkling Vouvray.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say I failed to say yeah, and you can make Chenin Blanc into sparkling wine too, which they do a lot in Loire. It's just a really versatile grape, maybe because it has just enough of everything without being over the top in any single category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's pretty mild acidity. It's pretty mild, virtually no tannic component. It gets enough sugars accumulation that you can make it into dry wine or fully sweet wine. So it's just it's a great tool for winemakers to kind of do whatever stylistic spin on it they want, which is what makes it kind of fun.
Absolutely.
But I guess the downside of that is it doesn't have one huge thing which everybody gravitates to that makes it famous.
Right. There's no typical Chenin Blanc, I suppose.
Yeah, it's crazy when you can do the entire spectrum of styles with it.
Right.
Standard.
Yeah.
See, what Vouvray be like, oh, was it sweet or dry or sparkling?
Yeah.
How was it?
Yes.
Which version?
Yes.
I always want to
Was it a
sell.
dessert? Yeah.
Well, I always want to sell more Vouvray and Anjou here. They're such great producers of Chenin Blanc, but you have to be so careful to tell the consumer
What it
the
is.
sweetness level because the French still aren't that
Yes.
great at doing that.
Yeah.
So
That's
when
what I make. You don't need to know.
Just drink the wine.
they're getting better at
Drink the
it,
wine.
but you tell people you hype up a wine like this and be like, yeah, this is a great expression of Chenin Blanc. Go try Vouvray, and then I tell you that, and then you go into the vintage cellar and get a Vouvray, and it's sickeningly sweet. I mean, it'll be good,
Yeah.
but
Not exactly what you're.
if you're
looking
not
for.
up, yes, and if you're not up for that, you're like, oh. So just imagine this. If, for those of you that like sweet wines, imagine this exact aroma flavor profile with layered sweetness, more on the honeyed apricot side of layered sweetness.
Yep.
That's what this wine, that's what Chenin will do in the right hands. And it can be quite good, but if you don't like sweet, then you're not going to like it.
If you're expecting a nice middle of the road white to have with dinner, might not work out well depending on the dinner you've chosen.
Exactly. Let's read the label. Long noted as the champion grape of the Loire.
Look at the brain on this guy.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Chenin Blanc exhibits floral, melon, and tropical fruit characteristics, which provide a springboard for seductive fruit-forward wines that exhibit rich, mineral-driven undertones of crisp acidity. Okay, that now you've added too many adjectives in one. That was one sentence. I actually I like this wine. I like McPherson, but the description to me begs for editing, only because it says the rich tropical fruit. I guess we got some of those.
That's so funny because like what year is that one?
18, I believe.
When they have listed online, it's like a different description. But
Well, one would hope with vintage variation. But I think that saying it's got all this great fruit and the fruit is a springboard for mineral. I'm like, is it? I don't know. That one seems to, I think you're pushing some adjectives there.
yeah.
The fruit is a springboard for rock.
Okay.
Maybe the rock is a springboard for fruit, I think is the way it'd go there.
Right.
But what do I know? I just have a flair for alliteration. I'm not really a writer.
But no, great wine.
Yeah.
Solid like it.
Actually, I feel like just reading Texas, I think has more wineries than Virginia does.
Oh, I'm sure of that.
400.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, it's a
I'm,
bigger state, but yeah.
I'm sorry, did I fail to mention that? I mean,
I also think it's interesting because they're like, they got really hit so hard in Prohibition because still like 25% of their counties are like dry counties.
Right.
So like, it's very difficult to start a winery in a dry county.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
well, isn't Jack Daniels
Yep.
in a dry county?
They are. They are.
You know, when you wineries, a lot of their business is at the winery. You can't actually pour to anybody.
Yeah, but at the same time, what tourism-based business anywhere on planet Earth is making most of their money from the people within 10 miles of them?
True.
But no, usually it's tour, like you do like a wine tour, you can sell these
Yes,
places.
but not locals.
Yeah.
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 They've seen it. They might do it once, but that's not your repeat business.
It's not even, I don't even think they do it once. I think humans are so hilarious in that we most often know the least about that which is closest to us.
See that?
Especially when you grow up, you're like, oh, I hate this town. Wherever I grew up is stupid. I want to leave here. And then later you're like, oh, well, there's actually some good things there.
Wasn't too bad.
Yes, it wasn't too bad. I actually held this bottle that's been open all day for us just to smell against this one, which we just opened.
That one's 2 days.
2 days open. Oh, dear Lord, it's night and day. Go back and forth on that.
Which this
Doesn't
you
matter.
poured us new one.
This is the new one. That's the old one. That's the remnant of what's in there.
It's really hard to smell from the top.
Oh, not me. I think it's wildly different and accessible. Let's get another glass in here if you want to swirl it.
Yeah, this one kind of smells like
It's important.
cardboard.
Yeah.
Almost.
Maybe it's on the brink of being passed, but it doesn't smell oxidized. It just smells totally different.
Yeah.
It almost smells sweet to me. Whereas this one's much more kind of leathery, peppery, just on the smell.
Right. So we have poured off and moving on to the third wine, which is the Provisioner out of Arizona. If that's correct, yes.
Arizona Red Table Wine.
Yep. So I'm unsure of what the blend is on this.
I've got a hint only because I was asking Katie earlier. Because I know these folks, I know Maynard and these Provisioner folks love Sangiovese
I
for
was
some
going to say
reason.
that's
It's a
Sangiovese, Merlot, and
Grenache.
Grenache.
that is a very interesting mix.
Right.
It has a lighter body to it. It's quite interesting.
Well, it's definitely
The Sangio's helping bring the lighter body.
very, very light. You can read through it.
Will Nance said, shout out from Haymarket, Virginia.
Haymarket.
Said, let's put this kid's bed. Hope you can catch the next one.
Welcome.
I'll deliver wines to Haymarket.
I don't know where that is.
Haymarket?
I don't know where that is either.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of, is there a place called Newmarket just off the interstate?
Yes, that's
Yes.
the place.
Oh, I'm thinking of Newmarket. Haymarket, Virginia. It's got to be close, right? He's tuning in.
So We need to know, where's Haymarket?
No, Prince William County. Isn't that
Oh,
way up
whoa, whoa, that's way the hell up there.
That's Northern Virginia, right?
there?
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, oh.
That's not just Northern Virginia. That's like on the coast underneath D.C., isn't it? Prince William?
Yeah, because Prince George
66.
is Manassas
66,
area.
south of D.C., going towards the water.
Right before Manassas.
All right. Oh, before Manassas. I thought it was after.
Well, that's
Obviously,
probably
we
out of
know
our delivery
our
range.
northern Virginia geography as well as we know our Arizona geography. Because I got nothing. I'm just going to say this is from the Grand Canyon AVA, which it probably does not exist, but I know the Grand Canyon.
I think I would like it to be from the Grand Canyon AVA.
All right, let's just want to pretend. Let's see if it lists the AVA on here.
So
I didn't see
Arizona has no AVAs yet. They've
Oh.
been petitioned to have one. They do not have one yet.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's just all labeled as
the-
Arizona
It's from.
wine.
It says it's from Camp Verde.
Verde Valley.
Verde Valley, and
That's
that is
the one they're trying to have the AVA in.
Right.
That's where all of them are. That's the main one.
I see.
All
Maynard.
They petitioned to have it. They have not been approved yet.
Got it.
All right. Well, what do you guys get from this wine?
I get a little like foxy pepper. A little, like, funk.
I'm getting more of the dried fruits. I'm definitely for me, on the dried fruit versus jammy fruit side of the
Yes.
spectrum.
Yeah. They definitely wouldn't say anything like strawberry or cherry or anything like that.
Even plummy, it's like, nope, it's not near the dark fruit. It's not near the rich jammy dark fruits. It's got some spice too, some dried thyme or oregano or
Little hint of tobacco, dried tobacco, not green tobacco.
yeah, that's interesting.
It's really weird because on the finish it has this like almost like deep plum or like something. Has like a really round, almost like raisiny flavor finish to me.
This sucker's dry too.
It's really dry, but for some reason I get like pruny finish.
It's one of those wines that's so dry I need a drink after it.
Yeah, I don't get prune, but I do get a little bit of raisin.
Something like
Not sweet,
No,
like
like
the
that.
raisin, but
We're back to dried.
yeah.
Things
but
that are
like
dry.
dried fruit, but it has like that hint of sweetness. Like, not even, but like dried.
No, it's interesting. What's the alcohol on this one? 13 or
What
so?
would you guess? I
I'd
guess low, but
I'd say 13.2.
how you looked.
No, I actually didn't. But
It's 13.2. It's a 13.2.
wow. But no,
That's pretty low though. That's pretty low for a red.
For a red.
Well,
What year is this one?
I think it's an 18 as well.
yeah. And they're just calling it 2018 Arizona Red Table Wine.
Because their own website's saying a different blend than what every other website's saying. But they
Perfect.
also are saying it's 2018, 2017 label text sheet. They're saying it's mostly Cab, Grenache, Zin, and then a bunch of other stuff.
This wine?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I'd say this is Sangiovese,
That's
but
yeah, but I don't know what to believe because it's not the right.
you're saying that it's being described as Cab Zin?
I wouldn't. I don't
Yeah, I
get
don't get that
at all.
either, but that's what their website's saying. And it's also saying 2017, and then other websites have different. Yeah.
Well, Provisioner, if you're listening, get it together.
Well,
Yeah, so
it up.
the 2018 says, so the image you see here, when I click on it, it's a different, doesn't show that. So this one says Sangiovese Nebbiolo
there you go.
Cabernet.
Nebbiolo?
Wait, yeah.
What?
When
Okay.
I click on it,
That's
it goes
where
to
you're getting that.
2017, and then it has completely different ones. So I have no idea what this is made of.
That is very odd.
Yeah.
Nebbiolo makes sense from your guys'
Yes, I
description
would
of
say that
raisin
one.
and dried plum. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's Nebbiolo. That's not Sangiovese.
It's so crazy how off what the internet's saying. Even
Anyway,
their own
but
website's lying.
It's got good balance to it. It is a bit dry on the finish.
Super dry, and I think it's thinner bodied. I'd say it's medium bodied at best for red wine, and maybe even call it light bodied. I mean, you can
I would
literally see right through it.
I would definitely lean on a light body.
Which, by the way, that's not a fault. We're just describing the wine.
It's got a very
Would it be-
similar body to Pinot Noir. Very,
Yeah.
very, very light.
I agree. It's a light bodied. I think it's kind of on the super acidic side almost, or maybe it's a tannic component that I'm getting because there's a lot going on. That's the only reason I would say that it's a Sangiovese or a Nebbiolo in a blind tasting because I'm like, there's a lot for a thin-bodied wine. There's a lot of acidity and tannin going on here.
Yeah, I don't get any of the Zinfandel or even Cabernet.
No, that's the jammy stuff.
No, I don't.
It's very odd.
Who knows?
We've been wrong in the past. Well, I
Who
have.
knows what it's made of? It's just unknown.
It's made of purple juice. That's what she's
Hope
made
for the
of.
best.
Well, the question is, do we like it?
I do. It's
I do too, and I don't know why.
a different expression.
I think it's good food.
I think it drinks the way it looks, and what you get out of the glass is what you're expecting. But it also has just a really decent drinkability to it.
Yeah, actually, I'd be curious to give it like a slight chill to it.
Thought the same thing. What would happen if it got a little bit cold?
Yeah.
Just a cellar temp.
Yeah, bring it down like 60, 65, something like that.
I think I want this with some red eye gravy.
Oh.
Now I want red eye gravy. I have not eaten dinner.
The power of suggestion.
Now all I want is red eye gravy.
So I'm like seeing hints that this is actually offshoot of Arizona Stronghold, which is I think it's Eric Glomsky's.
Eric Glomsky is the name of the producer of this, right?
No, it's well, I
He
don't
does
know.
Arizona Stronghold, but I
Yeah.
thought Provisioner was a subsidiary of them.
It is, but like you know how their websites are like, no, it's our own brand. We don't do it with anybody
Okay.
else. No, it's just us. So, I don't know.
Well, we only know about this wine because of a rock star, who's one of the first big wine producers in Arizona. His name's Maynard. It's Maynard Keynes, right? Maynard Keenan. Maynard Keynes was an economist, I think.
Totally different.
The lead singer for a band called Tool. It's past my time. I'm too old, so I never knew who this dude was. But we watched this documentary that I now use for class called Blood into Wine. While you're drinking this Provisioner red blend from Arizona, or the other wines that we'll have from Maynard's vineyard, which is called Merkin. Caduceus is the name of the winery. Merkin is one of the vineyards, right? Or I got that backwards.
Yeah,
You got it right.
Caduceus. So when you try some of those later this month, or while you're sipping on this, go see if you can track down a documentary called Blood into Wine. There are elements, it's one of the best wine documentaries there is. I'm saying that not because I'm promoting the wines that we're drinking right now, nor because it's about a rock star, but it's one of the best documentaries on wine, and I've seen all of them because I use them for class. But it's really good because it breaks things into the seasonality of the vineyard, and they really, in a very light-hearted way, they really get into depth about certain elements of vineyard production and how that translates into the wine. And with a gentleman that Katie was referencing, his name's Eric Glomsky. He is just a good old boy, agriculturalist hippie living in Arizona, who got this rock star, has been helping out this rock star in his initial plantings, which has got to be 10 or 15 or 20 years ago now.
Yeah. So maybe it was 2010.
But Glomsky is a genius. I love that dude. I want to party with that dude because he talks a lot about terroir, and again, in a very hippie, casual way, and talks about being able to smell elements of things in bloom in certain river valleys in Arizona. That he used to be a backpacker and do all this stuff, and it's just a well put together documentary if you can get past the rock star parts, of which there are plenty. So they marry this story of this rock star and him starting this vineyard in the middle of nowhere in Verde Valley, Arizona. But it's done with it's got a very high production value. It's got a good soundtrack. It has really great graphics. They even have a comedy routine.
Yeah.
So the whole movie starts and it keeps coming back to this comedy routine of this rock star being interviewed by two goofballs who hate wine in like a public access TV show. It just keeps coming back to it. It's quite hilarious, actually. But it's a documentary that's got a lot to say. So
Especially about the Verde Valley and like why was this region was chosen and like the type of growing area it is and what was the
you're basically there movie and do a Q&A afterwards because that's worked for me in the past. we've gotten to talk to presidents and prime ministers doing that stunt in the past.
Merlove guy.
We did get a filmmaker to come
Yeah.
on the Merlove documentary. Anyway, Maynard Keenan, again, before I even knew who he was, he didn't. All right, so we need to wrap up the old Bacchus bag here anyway.
Absolutely.
Head the hell out.
So, those of you that were able to join us in actually tasting the wine tonight, thank you very much for stopping in. Those that haven't had an opportunity, we're always open here, 4 o'clock every day. Come and visit. And then we're going to be having a few more different examples throughout the month. Start peppering with a lot of different things that we're able to source out of this region.
Yep, 4 to 6 wines from southwestern U.S. will be available by the glass for the rest of this month.
Absolutely.
And then we'll take any suggestions you have. How am I getting hit with sun right here? Look at that. It's almost
Some people
impossible.
say they can see us, some people say they can't, so I'm not sure what's going on.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Thank you guys so much. Let us know if you want us to do it again